NBA standings, and we're going to go to the Western Conference since we didn't really get a chance to talk about them last time. Um, Pete, we know when we look at this, we know about the bottom teams. The Spurs and the Rockets for sure. These teams are the epitome of just mediocrity at its finest. What is there any glimmer of hope for any of these two teams? I mean, right now the Rockets are on an 11-game losing streak. The Spurs are on a 2-game winning streak, but both teams are pretty mediocre. Is there anything positive to say about these two teams at all?
What was the first team you said? It's the Rockets and who?
The Spurs.
Spurs?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's an obvious one. It's Wembanyama. I mean,
Yeah.
that's literally... I mean, you want the trauma for Yama. That's literally, that's what we're talking about. This is like these are the two squads right here that are in pole position for this man. And I mean, we've been saying it all season, Bernie. I think there's people who probably get annoyed with us at this point. I honestly, dude, I don't think people are talking about Wembanyama enough. Maybe I'm like one of the crazy people who like, we've been talking about it more than most people in his position, prospects coming up.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem enough. Like, this dude has a legit shot to come into the NBA and be like an all-star in his first season. I mean, that doesn't really happen in the NBA very often. I mean, I don't even know the last time if that's even ever happened. I don't know when it would be. It's few and far between regardless, though. But the thing is any team that's as clearly in position to get this dude as those two teams are doing the right thing. And I've said it, I think, since the beginning of last offseason. I think there's no better team he could go to than the Spurs. I mean, you have a track record of European players and big guys going there and having, immeasurable success compared to their peers. I think that's where I would want to go if I was Wembanyama. I would look at the lineage of Popovich. I'd look at Tim Duncan. I'd look at David Robinson. I'd look at those guys and I'd say, I can be the next in the line of this, great franchise and set myself up for success and learn from the best. And I honestly think one of the things that, I don't know, man, maybe this is me just being an old head again, because nowadays I don't think a lot of these players think like this. If you're going to go to a team as a rookie and be the guy somewhere, there's not many places I would want to go that are even available to Wembanyama that have the historical significance that the Spurs do in the NBA. And mind you, a lot of it's modern history in terms of like the 2000s and the late 90s, but that still has to matter for something. I mean, we've talked about this a bunch of times too, but look at the Mavericks with Luka and his connection to Dirk. That matters. It has to matter. I mean, you have to think having somebody that has that much in common with your new guy, but has also that much invested in your team and franchise, connecting all three of you as one unit that's important stuff. And, I'd be happy for it. The Spurs, I would say, probably have the worst roster in the NBA personally. I do like a few of their players quite a bit. I'm actually, I think, way higher on Jeremy Sohan than most people are. I think if you look at his... People talk about the free throw thing all the time. I do think that's super important, but they're not talking about it for the right reasons. It's look at the freak show. Look at how interesting this is. He's shooting with one hand. It's not... Look at how humble and, the humility of this guy to be able to take the criticism that he's a bad shooter and just do whatever his coaches tell him. Like, to me, that's the sign that you're a mature young person trying to be better. But also Devin Vassell. Nobody talks about Devin Vassell. I feel like he's legitimately talented. He's not that far off of somebody like Desmond Bane. Like, those two dudes are pretty comparable in my opinion. The Spurs... Not a lot to look forward to, but you still have the best coach historically in the NBA, in my opinion. And, the potential for a new Tim Duncan. That's one thing. The Rockets, I feel much worse about them, even though they have a lot better talent. And a lot of that just has to do with the infrastructure. I don't really understand what they're doing. You have a bad coach. We've bemoaned all season the fact that they don't really put their young dudes in a position to get better. Like, literally, that's one of the biggest things I have a problem with in all of basketball right now, is these bad tanking teams, some of them are doing the guys on their teams no favors. I get wanting to go for Wembanyama. I get it. but at least try to teach your guys how to be better at basketball. At least try. Like for all we know, these 2 years have ruined Jalen Green from ever being a productive member of a winning team. For all we know, as of right now, he might just be a,
Mhm.
a selfish ball hog type of player, which is what people thought of him coming into the draft. And he hasn't even had a chance to prove it otherwise because that's what his team expects of him. I think that's so ridiculous. That's just a bad example to set. Not all that dissimilar to, the process 76ers with Simmons and Embiid. So this could be another situation like that. They have all the talent, but none of the mentality to back up the talent. That's one thing. And also, Bernie, I mean, this is a good little moment to talk about this little Harden situation about,
Yeah.
all these reports coming out. Like, to me, that's another situation where it just spells they have no strategy long term.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
why would you bring Harden back now after these 2 years? There's no logic behind it. He's probably the worst guy you could set up your young core with to then, convince them to play team basketball. Like, and that's not necessarily saying he's not a team player. It's just he doesn't entice his other players around him to be that way per se. And historically in Houston, especially so. Like that was definitely not his game in Houston. So I
Yeah.
don't really get that. What do you think about that, Bernie?
I mean, I mean, just in terms of the James Harden thing, it's just one of those things where I don't understand why there's rumors of him wanting to go there. Again, there's nothing on this team right now that says it screams that
Makes
this
sense for
team
Harden.
makes sense for Harden because I think he just likes the Texas area.
Yeah, it's the city. He
It's
just
the
wants to go there and be the man again.
yeah. But in terms of like the roster itself, I mean, it's probably one of the worst constructed rosters because of the way that the team plays. I mean, if we look at the
Hmm.
stats here on the screen, everything in red basically tells you that they are one of the worst teams in the NBA. They're one of the worst teams in terms of field goal percentage. Like they're not making a lot of their shots. They're not making a lot of their three pointers. They're 24th in the league.
Hmm.
3 point percentage or 3 point make, sorry, but 3 point percentage dead last. Free throw percentage, fifth worst in the NBA. Assist to me is the biggest one. Like when I watch them play, it's
Yeah.
very AAU, very go to hell ball, and it is one
They
of
are
those.
the AAU NBA team.
They are the AAU NBA team, and it's so frustrating to watch them play because I think that they have a lot of talented players. I think Sengun can be almost like a Jokic s type of player. Not saying that he is as good as Jokic or anything
I
like
feel
that.
like I feel like some crow might need to be eaten about Sangoon as well. I
I
feel like there was
think
some
he's good,
very
man.
anti-Sangoon early on in Sangoon's career. I'm just saying there was some
No, I was
anti-Sangoon
I was
floating around this channel.
I was
Maybe
pretty
it wasn't you. Maybe it was some of the other people we've had on the stream before. Very anti-Sangoon.
yeah, like I'm
Dude's
a
a
big
beast.
I'm a big Sengun guy, and I think that if they can start playing through him a little bit more and start playing that sort of post split action that
Uh-huh.
seems to be a little bit better in terms of like the way that Jokic plays, right? He catches it at like the left or right free throw, and then people go off of the actions that they can do, and I just think that that's what's gonna get guys like Jalen Green and guys like even Jabari Smith even more looks or better looks
Yeah.
if they can continue to play that. But every time I see them play, it's dribble, dribble, dribble. Let me go off a ball screen. Don't have anything. I'm just going to chuck up a really bad shot. And when they do that, and they don't play any defense, if you look at the stats for the opponents, like the opponents are absolutely killing them. And,
Yeah.
shooting one of the second worst teams at defending the three, one of the like top 10 worst field goal percentage. I mean, people are just scoring left and right on them. And their
Hmm.
defense is absolutely garbage. Like they're only putting up 109 points compared to giving up 118 points. You're not winning any basketball games that way. And again, their goal isn't to win basketball games. I get it. Their
Yeah.
goal is to, tank for Wembanyama. But at the end of the day, like this is bad habits, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the 76ers. Like you're teaching bad
Yeah.
habits to these young guys, and that's why guys to me like Ben Simmons never learned the consequences of, hey, you need to start winning these games. You need to start playing better if you want to get going. Um,
Sure. And like just the mentality that like winning is not necessarily how you shouldn't necessarily be okay with just losing all the time. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds so obvious, but that's literally just a factual statement
Yeah.
when you're at this highest level of competition. We've seen it time and time again. These dudes who are in a position where winning culture is not the focus, they don't necessarily develop into winning players. It's literally,
Hmm.
I mean, there's a lineage of players that have all the talent in the world, but situationally are in a place where that is not the objective of their team. Like, I think of somebody like Boogie Cousins as a great example. Like, he was not in a position where that was anything near the focus of what the
Hmm.
early portion of his career was, and then his career just fell through his hands like sand on a beach, right? Like, he watched the best part of his career go by with nothing to show for it because he was in a place where that's not what they cared about. And I do think one thing too, Bernie, maybe you can speak on this, right? Because I'm not a basketball coach like you are. I coached third through fifth grade boys and girls like 5 or 10 years ago, and I was
Hmm.
a terrible coach. It's just not my skill set. All right. That being said, I do think one of the things about the Houston Rockets that drives me nuts, and it drives me nuts in the exact same way that the 76ers process teams drove me nuts. It's coaching literacy. Whether or not that's a real term, that doesn't make a difference. I'm making it up right now. It's having a coach who you are, simultaneously developing alongside your players. Like a
Yeah.
guy that you have faith can actually coach you to victories in the
Hmm.
long run. If not, why do you have them as your coach? Regardless
Right.
if you're trying to lose or not, you need to have a coach who actually coaches your players, right?
Hmm.
Like, there's a way of tanking, and this is one of the fundamental differences between these two teams. And I don't want to waste our whole stream on these two teams. However, it's one of the key differences between the Spurs and the Rockets. I think you can be a terrible team and lose a lot of games and still receive at least some quality coaching, if not just quality coaching generally, versus just being a bad team and putting a bad coach in front of your team to then make your team worse because of a bad coach. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that to me is the wrong way to look at tanking. Like, I think if you look at a team like the Thunder is another great example. I feel like Mark
Hmm.
Dagnall is like a legitimately good coach. Like, he is developing as a
Yeah.
coach as his team gets better. Mike Malone in Denver developed as a coach
Hmm.
as his team grew. That is not what's happening with Steven Silas. Steven Silas is an abysmal coach so far. Maybe he's not an abysmal coach. He has looked much closer to a Brett Brown than a Mike Malone or whoever you want to name, Taylor Jenkins for Memphis.
Yeah.
Like, it's terrible. It's a disservice to your guys. I hate it.
Yeah.
I absolutely hate it.
It's frustrating because I think he can be a good coach. I just think that
Not with
you're
this team.
not with
It's too
this
late now.
not with this team, and I just think the players that they have, it just doesn't. I don't think it fits the way that I think Silas wants to coach.
Oh,
Guys like Kevin Porter again. He was, I think had a promising future, but as of
he's
late, he's just been too inconsistent for me. Like
too
43,
selfish,
too
man.
selfish. Like a lot of these guys have been too selfish, and it's been frustrating
Sure,
to
that's their whole
watch.
team.
And
Yeah.
it's been frustrating to watch as a basketball coach and just someone that watches the NBA. Earlier in the season, I was like, okay, this might be a team. This might be a league pass team. This might be a team that you're like, okay, let me go see what's up with the Houston Rockets. Just like the Orlando Magic are, or the Orlando Magic to
Hmm.
me are a team that shows how it can be done the right way. Yes, you'll
Exactly.
you'll lose a lot of games, but at the same time, you're playing great basketball and you're coaching it in a way where you're setting these players up for success because they're put in positions that when better players come
Hmm.
in and when the right pieces are put in place, the way that it's going to be happening, the way that they're going to be playing is a lot better than what we're seeing right now. But again, with a lot of this ISO ball and I know we're spending a lot of time on the Rockets, but a lot of stuff that I'm seeing, man, it's just like too much ISO ball, too much hero ball, and not enough moving the ball around. And clearly, the stats show you as one of the seventh worst team in the NBA
Yeah.
at doing that, at moving the ball and getting it to other people. And again, they are a turnover machine as well. 20,
Just no,
23rd
yeah,
in the league. It's abysmal.
no development whatsoever. Let me ask you one last question for the Rockets, because I do think this is a legitimately interesting question that I don't just because they're so bad and so hard to watch, I don't feel like anybody really talks about this. I think they kind of have an interesting choice of who they're going to develop around, like as their actual guy.
Yeah,
Who do you think is the most promising player of their young dudes so far?
I
Because to
think
me,
it's Sangoon.
I mean, to me, it's Sangoon. I mean,
It's
honestly, you look at
Sangoon,
what
and
the
it's not
NBA
even
is.
close.
Yeah, I mean, all right. I'm glad we're in agreement because Sangoon is he is of all the dudes on their team the one actually, and I would say Jabari Smith Jr. I know you're not as high on him so far this season, but
Yeah,
I've seen some moments of like this guy could be legitimately like 2023 um, Rashard Lewis. Like he could be that. He
yeah,
could be. But he's not, obviously. Sengun is the only one that has flashes of like this guy could be a
yeah.
winning player on a winning team.
Yeah, and that's the only guy because I mean, like Jabari Smith. I mean, I want to
It's
see him
just
play a little
development.
bit more, and I see him a little developed. But I just think he's to me, it kind of reminds me of like a guy like Robert Covington, which is no knock against him at all. I just think that that's kind of where I
Yeah.
see him kind of fitting that mold.
If he doesn't
Uh,
get better coaching soon, sure. Yeah, I mean that might be his ceiling for sure. That's a bummer, but yeah.
um, Jalen Green, I think has been just kind of just like let me just chuck it up, type of player. So
Yeah.
I've been a little
He's
disappointed in his development, but I
hurts me.
like he has great bounce. Like I think he has a lot of the athletic keys that you need for a great guard. I just think he needs a coach to help him and unlock him a little bit more. So I want to see him kind of have another year like really train with some purpose next year. So I'm hoping he goes to the right off-season coaches and trains with them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean that's really it. I mean, I know there's Kevin Porter Jr., but again, I see him
I'm
more
not
as I
I don't
see him more as
believe.
like a sixth man, like kind of role player coming off the bench and helping a team rather than being like the guy.
I'm not. I'm kind of off him. I honestly don't even know if I don't know, man. You know me. I'm a chemistry attitude type of guy, and he always gives me like the worst kind of vibes as far as that's concerned. I hope I'm wrong. He seems like
Yeah.
I mean he's very talented. That's for
hmm
sure.
And really quick, let's read some comments before we move on
Sure.
to the next part. McCluskey said, abolish the draft, make the team spend that money. The draft encourages
Mm,
tanking and robs these players of so much money.
there's a balance to that, in my opinion, Anthony. I think like we don't need to get too deep into this. Bernie and I have talked about this at lengths in different videos, but there is such a wealth disparity between some of the owners that would get out of hand so quickly, and it would be much more like I
hmm
don't know if you're familiar with like the English Premier League or just soccer in general, world football. It would start to get very much like that, where you have these 4 to 5 teams in each conference that have the most money and they end up getting all the best players. There's I agree with your principle though that the draft certainly is not the way to do it. I almost think there needs to be like a give and take with the draft. Like if
hmm
you are the worst team, and I think we might have even discussed this in a different video too, but
Yeah.
like if you're bad like consecutive years in a row, and there really is no change to your plan or anything, like there should be some sort of negative incentive, right? Like there really should be. You can't just be the worst team every year purposefully with nothing to show for it and just keep expecting your fans to pay tons of money. I think that's an awful way to handle it. And like you said, Anthony, it does screw your players really, really bad. I mean, out of money and longevity in their careers. That's kind of what we're getting on with this
Yeah.
Rockets situation. There's some of these dudes, their careers are significantly worse off now because they've been a part of this team. I genuinely feel that way.
hmm
I just think we've seen it too many times in NBA history where if you're a part of something this ugly and this disheveled and disorganized, you're not going to pan out the best way you could have.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is your infrastructure, right? So, like,
Mm.
the Houston Rockets are going to be having like the worst, like, front office executives and things like that. That to me is the reason why a team is not progressing very well. Where
I got an
teams,
idea, Bernie.
where teams like the Spurs and all that stuff, like they do a pretty good job of developing, they do a good job of the infrastructure around these players so they can be better. What were we gonna say?
I got an idea. Anthony, you just spurred an idea. Change the draft so the number one pick goes to the best team that missed the playoffs. And then he said, agree 100%, fit as everything as a rookie. Let me go off your idea just a little bit, Anthony. What if you had a reverse bracket draft playoff like tournament, right?
Play for
Where you
one for one.
take yeah, I mean, why not? Because then it's a double incentive where you don't necessarily want to be so bad that
Yeah.
you can't compete in that tournament,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to at least get your team ready to compete for that.
Yeah.
Even if you're in the bottom 14 teams or 15 teams, whatever it is, you have to be prepared for this. But it still puts you in a position where you are competing against the best of the worst, right? So it's not impossible to get there. I don't know, man. I think that would be really interesting, and I do think maybe there would have to be some structure to that there because you could have reverse tanking get way out of hand where you have good teams try and make it into that to then get an easy number one overall pick, right? So there
Yeah.
would have to be some way to balance that out, but that would be interesting. That would be very interesting.
Maybe like make the final fours and just let them battle
Yeah,
it out
maybe
for the.
just the clear bottom 8 teams, right? Like you have to and one thing too, Bernie, we haven't even really had a chance to discuss a big controversy in the NBA, which is like resting players. I mean, that's
Yeah.
literally like the biggest controversy in all of basketball right now.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just brewing even more and more. There would have to be some way to maybe incentivize like a dual incentivization of like you play your players a certain amount, like a certain percentage qualifies you for this tournament, and then you play it out for the top pick or whatever it
Yeah.
is, the top picks. That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different routes we can go down. And I think we can revisit this topic on another day. But I just think like in terms of uh teams like the Rockets, teams like the Spurs, like the Charlotte Hornets, like we need to figure out how they are going to address the issues that they have, right? Because they have a
Yeah.
lot of them. They're obviously trying to tank for one guy and one guy only. Maybe a couple other guys too, but for the most part, just one guy only. And so I'm curious to see how these two teams kind of duke it out in the next couple of weeks because obviously there's less than 20 games now remaining. So let
Uh-huh.
us know in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of the Houston Rockets and the San Antonio Spurs? Are they a team? Like, which team are you more excited about? Which team has a better future? Uh, Coach's cage fight for picks. That might be another one too. A little MMA fighting. But again, let us know in the comment section down below. What do you guys make of all this stuff? We'd love to know your opinions and comments in the comment section down below.